All right, you just heard the mention of the African Development Bank President, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Well, he today at the African Afdb spring meetings paid homage to the founding fathers and past heads of the Development Financial Institution. His address was the curtain raiser for the grand 60th anniversary of the Afdb scheduled for September. Let's take a listen.
In 60 years, we have not diminished. In 60 years, we have grown. In 60 years, we are delivering at scale for Africa. From just the initial committee of 9 when we started, and 23 countries who signed up when we launched out, we now count 81 member countries. When the founders of the African Development Bank met in Khartoum, Sudan in 1963, they had a dream: promoting and accelerating the economic and social development of African countries. 1 year after, in 1964, I was only 4 years old. The first board of governors of the bank met in Lagos, Nigeria. So started the journey of hope for Africa. From our first projects in Sierra Leone, the National Development Bank of Sierra Leone, and Kenya right here, Mr. President, the Athi River, Namanga Road, in Kenya's southeastern region connecting to Tanzania, we now have over 5,600 projects across Africa. As we continue this journey of hope for Africa, we honor and celebrate the hard work, the leadership, and the efforts of 7 presidents of the bank before me. I would like to therefore honor the service and tremendous accomplishments of those presidents. President Mamoun Bihari, President Abdulwahed Labidi, President Kwame Furwa, President Willem Mungoba, who was somebody who also liked bow tie like myself, President Babaka Ndiaye, President Omar Kabaj, and President Donald Kaberuka. The dream is being realized, one strategy at a time, one president at a time. But it takes all of our shareholders, you, to support us to make things happen. You, our shareholders, who celebrate with us today, you make the African Development Bank what it is today. You do so in many ways: your financial support, your moral support, but the support you give us in your various capitals. Our heads of states and government, you have continued to strongly support us as a bank over the last 60 years. And I'd like to use this time to particularly thank His Excellency President William Ruto for the wonderful announcement that you made this morning, that you'll be contributing $25 million to the African Development Fund. That will make you the largest contributor to that fund as a regional member country. Thank you also for your bold call for a 17th replenishment of the fund at $25 billion, and thank you for your seed financing towards that, and thank you once again, Mr. President. So important is the African Development Bank that the Organization of African Unity gave it a clear mandate, and you heard it from Chairperson Musa Faki, to mobilize development financing for Africa. And we are doing so with your collective support. In 2019, you, the shareholders of the bank, raised the capital of the bank from $93 billion to $208 billion, the highest in the history of the bank since it was established in 1964. Thank you very much. But the strength of the bank has always been its staff. From just 10 pioneer members in 1964, we now have 2,092 staff members today from 76 countries. We all come with one goal in mind: accelerate Africa's development. Our board of governors and board of directors from 81 member countries have been the guiding lights for the bank. From an initial capital base of $250 million when we started, see where we are today. The African Development Bank has consistently maintained its AAA ratings and is the only AAA rated financial institution in Africa. We are proud to have created and incubated and nurtured solid African financial institutions, including the Africa Export-Import Bank, the West Africa Development Bank, Shelter Afrique, Africa 50, among others. The African Development Bank is a trusted voice for Africa at the global level. Whether it is at G7, whether it's at G20, the African Development Bank is there with a seat at the table, and we use that voice to advance Africa's interests. The African Development Bank is responsive to Africa's needs. When COVID-19 struck, we responded swiftly and increased net outflows to countries with a crisis response facility of up to $10 billion. Your Excellencies, the African Development Bank is now helping to support Africa to produce its own medicines and vaccines. And that is what led us as an institution to create a new institution called the African Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation. I would like to thank you, Mr. President Kagame, as the chairman of the Eminent Advisory Council of this foundation. And thank you very much for hosting this foundation's headquarters in Kigali. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am delighted that in less than 1 year since its establishment, the African Technology Foundation, like all the other institutions we set up before, was listed by DIVEX as one of the 24 institutions to watch out for globally in 2024. Just last week, I was at the G7 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting in Stresa, Italy, where the G7 strongly supported the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, jointly developed by the African Development Bank, Africa 50, and the Africa Union. It was quite exciting that the G7 collectively pledged $150 million to AGIA. The G7 also pledged support for the callable capital increase of the African Development Bank. The G7 also signaled strong support for the successful 17th replenishment of the African Development Fund. Never has the African Development Bank received such wide recognition and strong support across the board for its work by the G7.